Now's your best chance to slip in unnoticed.
Fly a hind in this kind of weather.
So who's the other target?
That would be Chico. He's being held in the same area as Paz. Last radio contact was 40 hours ago. Find them both. Bring him back alive.
Both are being held as hostages.
We'll send a chopper from across the Cuban border. You should be back at Mother Base in time for lunch. You'll probably just miss our guests. The only catch is you go in solo. The politically sensitive nature of the mission needs backup is not an option.
Fine. I like some alone time now and then.
Last stop, we established that while MGS4 endlessly repeats the series source code, MGS5 overwrites it, leaving only phantom fragments in its white, turpid wake. What I hope to convey this op is that, despite this revisionism, MGS5 keeps one core characteristic of the series very much alive: deceiving the player. Yet unlike the other games, which had truths meant to be found, MGS5 gets across a different point entirely. Truth is whatever Cipher says it is, even when it makes no sense. As Orwell wrote, the enemy of power is common sense. Absolute control requires absolute dependence. The truth must be vaporized until, quote, everything faded into mist. Everything but our one and only friend, our big brother, Major Zero, and his system. Because both MGSV and Orwell's 1984 express that truth is a vulnerable hostage to the power of ideas. In pursuit of Platonic, abstract ideals, idealists have sought to kill much more than the truth. Yet Dr. Philip Zimbardo points out in his essay on Orwell, Mind Control, quote, more crimes against human nature have been committed in the name of obedience than rebellion, end quote. In order to condition individuals into conformity, the one-party state, Ingsoc, initiates open season on spying and informing. Zimbardo explains that rulers can benefit by eliminating, quote, interpersonal trust, the basis for a social support network, and spreading in its place, quote, distrust, suspicion, and conspiracy theories, end quote. Zimbardo points out, quote, when social bonds are broken, social isolation becomes common, and individuals exist in locked loneliness that diminishes the human spirit. In prison, the worst crime a prisoner can commit in violation of the prisoner's code of conduct is to become a snitch, end quote. Within such social environments, groupthink often sets in time setting off nightmarish results. The use of cassettes in MGS5 may in fact be a nod to one such case, the PT, or People's Temple, which famously committed inexplicable mass suicide in South America in the late 1970s. As Zimbardo explains, quote, Jim Jones's dominating mind control approaches were modeled directly on many of the strategies he had learned as a student of Orwell. 1984 became the Devil's Bible, end quote. It wasn't only cults like PT who were led by Orwellian ideas in the 1970s. The infamous Camp Omega-like School of the Americas instructed and conditioned various right-wing rulers and thugs to suppress leftist uprisings throughout Central and South America, through Ministry of Love-style torture, abuse, and interrogation. In both cases, anonymity and alienation work together to breed faceless men without compassion, morality, or restraint. Zimbardo explains the appeal of facelessness in his essay. Quote, "For young men to kill in wars, the most effective preparation is to arrange for them to make an external transformation of identity, so they can do normally evil deeds with impunity." End quote. Communities of anonymity, he explains, quote, "become jungles of self-interest and exploitation." End quote. But every power-hungry monster who uses 1984 as a manual share the ultimate goal of Ing Soc itself in the novel, to condition the people into serving the party's will as if it were their own, not just to be obeyed, but to be loved and feared all at once. The Orwellian core of MGS5 is on full display from the opening scene. The game begins with the ending of a larger narrative arc we later piece together via cassettes, the narrative of Chico and Paz's detainment. Skullface, like Ing Soc, overwhelmed Chico and the player with a barrage of contradictory ideas. He oscillates between rewarding and punishing Chico, filling his head with a barrage of confusion. By the scene's end, Chico resembles the model Orwellian subject. Distrustful, defeated, and deeply disturbed, nothing remains real or true for Chico beyond Skullface's hypnotic words, which explains why he reacts to Big Boss not with elation, but sheer terror. But the spirit of 1984 lives on, not only in the monologue, but in the entire style and sequencing of the opening cutscene itself. The furtive, unbroken shot gives the sense of being a voyeur or spy into these events, we're an isolated and paranoid POV. Crucially, the opening shows the player a direct route to both mission objectives. Like Winston, we've been ensnared in a trap hinging on our inner desire to know the truth and fight oppression. Also like Winston, things won't end how we like or expect, to put it very mildly. Every MGS story is some kind of ruse or another, but usually events are contrived as some secret test, experiment, or exercise by the Patriots, with our character Snake as their unwitting puppet. Only in Ground Zeroes do we see firsthand this setup unfold not as their stooge, but as their enemy. Like Ing Soc, Cipher does not merely kill its heretic, Big Boss. It annihilates all trace of his true existence. A total form of destruction the ancient Greeks would have called Omega. That's what the endless discrepancies, dangling threads, and unexplainable events conceal. The fact that Cipher have fully come between the mind and knowledge or reason themselves. In order to condition our POV into obedience and vengeful rancor, all truth is broken down into lie-strewn fragments like shattered glass. To even attempt a rational explanation or theory, as I regrettably tried last stop over specific details, is to play Cipher's game, as tempting as it may be. Because they've turned reality itself into a gambler's game, it's no surprise their house always wins. Easy to do if the cards are rigged properly. But that's what Cipher does. It watches all, controls information, orchestrates ruses, and keeps everyone in the dark. How arrogant are we as players to expect to understand the truth of a system or its actions which exists to distort the very concept of truth and reality?
You were using us all along.
Cipher's major purpose in Ground Zeroes is to hijack the narrative of Big Boss, or vaporize it in Orwellian terms. Within the span of a single day, Cipher induce a paradigm shift into the series' story, smashing apart everything we know about Big Boss, let alone MGS, in order to merge itself inside the character, themes, and storytelling.
Zero developed weapons, amassed armies, used information for extortion, all in order to gain more wealth. He was obsessed with controlling awareness on the inside from the outside. But I cannot imagine that's what the boss would have wanted. They both misinterpreted her will. And their absolute reverence for her drove them apart. So began the war between Zero and Big Boss.
Before MGSV, the series' story centered on a theoretical war between Big Boss and Cipher. Yet, thanks to Cipher's meddling, these previously established facts are destroyed, because by the Phantom Pain, Cipher have wormed their way into our very souls. Major Tom presents himself as a saintly old comrade, while XOF come to gradually replace Cipher as the game's apparent antagonist. It's conveyed that Skullface has stolen Zero's power over Cipher, just as it's explained that we owe our lives to Zero's quick thinking. All of these ideas feed the ultimate goal of Cipher, to convert the heretic, our character, Big Boss.
You can escape from it whenever you choose. Everything depends on you.
You did it. You reduced me to this.
No, Winston. You reduced yourself to it.
When will you shoot me?
It might take a long time. But don't give up hope.
As Zimbardo explains, quote, "It is hard to rebel against something that is being done for you and not to you. Nothing empowers abuse more than the lie it's being done for our own good. By crippling our avatar Snake only to gently nurse him back to health under the guise of being his one and only friend in a world that wants you dead, Cipher embodied the most powerful and therefore dangerous sort of modern totalitarian state."
Snake! Snake!
Medic!
In the wide majority, films and shows are told from a neutral point of view, in the sense that our POV shows us an unbiased vantage point into the narrative. In Lit, this is called a third-person, objective perspective. But some film genres, such as psychological horror or surrealism, frame their narratives within a character's mind, which works in a very direct and immediate way, visually, due to the nature of the medium. What's fun about MGS5 is how it blurs the line between these two perspectives in order to hammer home its central themes. It's never clear which register the game adopts from one scene to the next, subtly leading us to the desired conclusion. What we're told to see becomes much more reliable and logical than what we in fact do see. Stunningly, MGS5 enacts onto the player ourselves the exact same doublethink producing conditioning endured by its protagonist. Hence, fiction poisons reality, and in so doing makes visible the otherwise secret arbiter standing between the mind and reality, that half-guard, half-jailer, language. Language conditions and contextualizes our ideas on reality, yet many of us come to forget this essential fact quite readily. We often think we're in third-person objective while in fact occupying a strictly first-person subjective POV. This is the hidden weakness of the mind MGS5 exposes, how easily it can pass from fact to fiction. But the mind's greatest weakness, according to MGS5, is beyond, if not related, to its gullible forgetfulness. As Skullface understands all too well, the larger danger is in clinging to a sure falsehood as fact in times of grave threat. It's precisely concepts like hope and faith Skullface uses best.
You've done your part. You told us plenty. You've known the pain of ages. And even now you think, as any person would, that this can't be happening. Is it education? Morals? Faith? Just the imprint of a lifetime of stories? Face to face with oblivion, which is where you are, and you still think that help is coming. The world you were born into is made to save you. Isn't that right? Of course it is. Everyone knows that. Until your last breath, you know it. Without the slightest chance or reason left to them, humans are capable of hope. I'm no different. But for one thing, when my time came calling, I didn't die. My family died, my country died, but they didn't take me with them. All hell took from me was this skin, this outer peel that marked me human. My village had an oilseed field and a fine factory. Every day, my friends and I would see our parents at work in that factory. That's all I had, all the world I knew. Then one day, aircraft came droning in from some far-off sky. The factory was bombed. Some spies had told them we were making weapons. The building burned. We tried to flee outside. The crowd blocked the exit. The crowd of people. Hot. So hot. I tried to push through their legs and get ahead, but a boot in my stomach put me on the ground. The smoke of them burning filled me up. I heard my name called, but not for long. At the infirmary they carried me to, a nurse in the corridor saw me and remarked, as if it happened every day, they should let the poor thing die. Those are the only words of my mother tongue I remember. It was the language of my village. Until foreign troops invaded. Then the last identity I had left, the words I spoke, were pulled from me. My skin would never feel anything again. This face would be burned again, in torture, at foreign hands. But I still writhe in that burning factory, doused in scalding rapeseed oil. That's all I have to feel, that pain. All I have to remind me I exist here. Those spies reported well. We made weapons, all right. As cartloads of rifles came in from the battlefields, we fixed them up and sent them back out, so our country could win. Or rather, so that little world we knew could continue. I came to realize I mustn't die. I'm their last hope. All those who perished and left me here. I have to accomplish something. If I don't, their will be swept out of this world. So, do you see me now? Tell me, what do you see? You have eyes. What do your eyes see? Yes, that's right. You see a skull face. You see me. This skull is who I am. My mark, my proof of humanity. I have no country, no language. I have no face. but I haven't lost my skull. So I told myself, the pain and effort that keep me alive will never know relief, never bear fruit, never be repaid. I know that, but I told myself to focus on some hope, a non-existent hope, to guide me through this burning world. A hope. Call it a dream. A melancholic delusion. As the pressures within me stretch me to bursting, and I force myself not to cry out, though the words I thought were carved into me are gone, and all I knew is dead. I know how you feel. I've felt that. So show me that I'm not the only one. That you too can return to this world for revenge. Do you see me? Don't die. Don't die!
Our minds insist upon framing reality with ourselves at the center, its ground zero of importance. This inherent self-delusion provides a perfect roadmap to our own manipulation. We're less likely to question or protest scenarios, narratives, or ruses that put us at their center. The ultimate example in MGS5, of course, is Cipher's near religion of vengeance. A pretext to righteousness often shorts out the mind's humility, restraint, or reason. For some, the outrage of being wronged serves as a self-issued blank check to do whatever they alone decide is just or sane. This thinking is beyond foolish, mainly in how it erases its own logic in true doublethink fashion. By not showing prudence or restraint, the vengeful risk stepping outside justice. And by their own logic, that would then legitimize the other party to retaliate in kind, thus sparking an endless chain of revenge. But for the rulers hammering home this doctrine, an endless chain of revenge is precisely the point. As covered in MGS4, the war economy got its start because of so many blood feuds, sectarian clashes, and vendettas among states, religions, and organizations. Which is why, as MGS5 comes to show, its designers, the Patriots, worked so hard to drive up the world's demand for revenge. United against an outside threat, no ideology or system becomes anything but more extreme, more concentrated. Reasoned discussion, humility, and compromise become impossible, along with self-scrutiny and sometimes even sanity. Before long, the world's communities come to resemble the citizens of Ingsosh, distrustful, violent, and malicious. And as domestic suspicion coincides with a surge in domestic surveillance, the communities themselves begin to rot away from the inside. Driving this demonic doctrine are Platonic absolutes like enemy or friend. The ends, for example, never justify the means. To the contrary, it is only means which ever legitimize ends. Try telling that to an extremist or a narcissist as if there was much difference. But how does the MGS model of the birth and rise of the war economy and its doctrine of revenge compare to real history? Well, if you've paid attention, you'll know to suspect such a phrase as real history right away. Real history is what dies with the generation. All anyone can offer is biased, pseudo-historical recreation.
Whose footprints are these?
Remember back when we met?
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
Master, what are you doing here?
I quit being a drill instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet. I'm in retirement, just like you. Once in a while, I still help train the Alaskan Scouts.
Passing on the skills to a new generation, huh?
Campbell told me about the situation here. I thought I might be of some use.
There's no one I'd rather have in a foxhole than you.
Well, I know lots about survival in a harsh environment.
This series is about suspicion.
Who are you?
Like MGS seems to, we suspect that absolutes exist only in the mind. Ideas like good or evil, enemy or friend, are relative outside the convictions of a zealot. Yet, absolutes are extraordinary kinds of fiction. They drive the times. They're fictions which guide and shape our notions of reality. It doesn't matter in the mind of an absolutist that their crusade of choice hurts, kills, lies, cheats, steals, or even contradicts its own supposedly pure ideals. Because to absolutists, the ends justify any and every mean. It isn't the case that people are in total control of ideas. It's ideas, words, which control people.
Was called on evidence that the CIA had knowledge as early as 1986 that BCCI secretly controlled at least one U.S. bank and was engaged in fraudulent activity, citing allegations that the bank was involved in fraud and drug money laundering.
مع الواقع هو كان طبيعة من الناحية النفسية إنها طبيعة فيها جانب يعني استعلاء على الواقع محاولة تغيير الواقع.
Our story begins in 1979 with two key world events: the Iranian Revolution and the assassination of Egyptian leader Anwar Sadat. Sadat was killed for signing peace accords with Israel, which some saw as humiliating for Egypt and the Arab world at large. Yet humiliation was far from over.
Those who carried out the assassination were a group of army officers who were a part of Islamic Jihad. They were immediately arrested, and the regime launched a massive manhunt for those behind the plot.
As Lawrence Wright says in his book The Looming Tower, quote, Egypt's prisons became a factory for producing militants whose need for retribution, they called it justice, was all-consuming, end quote. Many of those responsible for conspiring to assassinate Sadat were brutally tortured and humiliated, along with those who had not been. There were those who wanted payback, not just on the repressive Egyptian regime, but on foreign empires, whose interference with the region's political makeup had facilitated its tyranny. But these Egyptian radicals were not the only ones infected by revenge. Vietnam, after all, had been a kind of torture in the eyes of Americans who live on the battlefield. They blamed the Soviets for the collapse of their war effort and for America's diminished hegemony. This led to a number of proxy battles between the two nations in the 70s, but it wasn't until Afghanis, emboldened by the Iranian Revolution in 1979, began to resist Soviet control in their country that US intelligence found the chance to finally give the Soviets a true Vietnam of their own. 6 months after America began to assist the anti-communist cause in Afghanistan, The Soviets invaded to stabilize their recently acquired satellite. They feared the spread of an anti-Red Islamic revolution because many of their oil-rich satellite states were, like Afghanistan, predominantly Muslim. And without oil wealth, the Soviets would lose all leverage to check Western geopolitical expansion, let alone maintain their own empire. As the Soviets prepared their invasion, American President Carter faced a crisis of his own. The Iranians had taken Americans hostage during their revolution. Carter's role in the Egyptian-Israeli peace talks made him a hated name in much of the Middle East. A failed rescue mission worsened matters and humiliated Carter at home and abroad. For a president less than a year away from an election, whose country remained economically devastated, things had become very dire indeed. So for Carter, assisting the anti-Soviet insurgency in Afghanistan was a no-brainer. But the Afghan militias were a far cry from the Viet Cong. They were outgunned, outmanned, undertrained, and outbudgeted. Helping them had to remain covert due to the politically sensitive nature of the operation, yet the aid had to be very prodigious. It became clear that the US would need outside help to truly make a Vietnam out of Afghanistan, militarily and economically. But Carter would not be the president to seek this help, because in 1980 he was defeated by Ronald Reagan. Within hours of Reagan's win, the Iranian hostages were released. Rumors persist that Reagan's people actually had made deals to ensure this timely release, though the Iranians didn't exactly need prompting to deny Carter a so-called October surprise. Either way, Carter was gone, and the moratorium on the Cold War went with him.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will...
President Reagan came to office promising to restore America's military and moral prestige in the world. Voters had responded when he pledged to be tough on terrorists, a vow he repeated time and again.
Let me further make it plain to the assassins in Beirut and their accomplices, wherever they may be, that America will never make concessions to terrorists.
That's what the president kept saying, but it's not what he was doing.
The neocons emerged from the wreckage of Vietnam and Watergate as a new kind of conservative movement.
The defeat in Vietnam and the resignation of President Nixon over Watergate led to a crisis of confidence in America's political class. And the neoconservatives seized their moment. They allied themselves with two right-wingers in the new administration of Gerald Ford. One was Donald Rumsfeld, the new Secretary of Defense. The other was Dick Cheney, the President's Chief of Staff.
The Soviet Union has been busy. They've been busy in terms of their level of effort. They've been busy in terms of the actual weapons that they've been producing. They've been busy in terms of expanding production rates. They've been busy in terms of expanding their institutional capability to produce additional weapons at additional rates.
The CIA and other agencies who watched the Soviet Union continuously for any sign of threat said that this was a complete fiction. There was no truth to Rumsfeld's allegations. But Rumsfeld used his position to persuade President Ford to set up an independent inquiry. He said it would prove that there was a hidden threat to America, and the inquiry would be run by a group of neoconservatives, one of whom was Paul Wolfowitz. The aim was to change the way America saw the Soviet Union. The neoconservatives set up a lobby group to publicize the findings of Team B. Through films and television, the committee portrayed a world in which America was under threat from hidden forces that could strike at any time. Forces that America must conquer to survive. It might not be true, but it was necessary to re-engage the public in a grand vision of America's destiny that would give meaning and purpose to their lives. The neoconservatives were succeeding in creating a simplistic fiction, a vision of the Soviet Union as the center of all evil in the world, and America as the only country that could rescue the world. And this nightmarish vision was beginning to give the neoconservatives great power and influence.
The specter of Marxist-Leninist-controlled governments with ideological and political loyalties to the Soviet Union poses a direct challenge to which we must respond. They are the focus of evil in the modern world.
It was a triumph for the neoconservatives. America was now setting out to do battle against the forces of evil in the world. But what had started out as the kind of myth that Leo Strauss had said was necessary for the American people increasingly came to be seen as the truth.
It's a chancy job. Makes a man watchful and a little lonely. But somebody has to do it.
I am going to a city where the roses never fade.
And at this very same moment, religion was being mobilized politically in America, but for a very different purpose. And those encouraging this were the neoconservatives. Many neoconservatives had become advisors to the presidential campaign of Ronald Reagan. And as they became more involved with the Republican Party, they had forged an alliance with the religious wing of the party, because it shared their aim of the moral regeneration of America.
The notion that a purely secular society can cope with all of the terrible pathologies that now affect our society, I think has turned out to be false, and that has made me culturally conservative. I mean, I really think religion has a role now to play.
Hey, poor! Hey, poor! Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here! Jesus
and it's the first of a three-part series. Tell us, in a couple of minutes, what this is about.
It's about a drug ring that operated in San Francisco and Los Angeles in the mid-'80s, and it was connected to a Nicaraguan anti-communist army called the FDN, which is one of the biggest groups that we know as the Contras, and it was selling cocaine in Los Angeles for the most part, but in other areas of the country as well.
Just as the Columbia we think represents man's finest aspirations in the field of science and technology, so too does the struggle of the Afghan people represent man's highest aspirations.
Jesus is here! Jesus is here!
Feel like your life is going nowhere. Feel like your life is going nowhere. Feel like your life is going nowhere. Feel like your life is going nowhere.
I'm in Jesus. I'm in Jesus. I'm in Jesus. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
What united this small group of ours was the vision of bringing more freedom to the world, more security to the world, to actually get rid of the Soviet Union itself. As a result, supporting the freedom fighters became the premier cause for the entire conservative movement during the Reagan years.
We're closer to being revolutionaries than conservatives in the sense that we want to change some deeply entrenched notions about the proper role of American power.
No sex until marriage.
They have basically said to the entire United States, we don't care what the people say, we don't care what the Congress says, we don't care what the other oversight organizations say, we're going to find some way to rid the planet of communism, and we don't care who gets killed in the process.
As long as there is breath in this body, I will speak and work, strive and struggle for the cause of the Nicaraguan freedom fighters.
Freedom fighters, they are not. They are terrorists.
Are not first-rate people. They're liars, greed and power motivated. This war, he said, has become a business to many of them.
The bomb that exploded at the Munich Oktoberfest on the 26th of September 1980 killed 13 people and injured over 200.
When I regained consciousness, I started to look for my children. First I found my little boy. I asked him, "Are you okay?" He answered, "It's nothing, Dad. I just feel cold." So I turned around and went a little further to where my daughter was lying. Her whole body was torn open. She said to me, and I will never forget these words, "Dad, help me, will you?" Then she died. My son had 2 bomb fragments right through his head. So both of my children died. I just can't help wondering, why?
The slaying was just one of a staggering 16 similar attacks carried out between 1982 and 85 that came to be known as the Brabant massacres. In total, 28 people died and 20 were injured. To this day, the killers have never been identified. René de Witt believes that it must be in someone's best interests, but they're never found.
If you discover the killers, you probably also discover other things.
Over a period of about 15 years, Europe was rocked by a series of terror attacks. The lives of thousands of people were turned upside down. But to this day, many aspects of the attacks remain a mystery. The bomb left in Milan's Piazza Fontana was one of the worst incidents, but 40 years on, no one has been convicted of the crime. Public prosecutor Guido Salvini has tried repeatedly to convict the men he believes were responsible for the bombing.
When we reopened the investigation in 1991, no one had been found guilty. The only guilty verdicts were for General Maletti and Captain Labruna, who tried to derail the investigation.
These 2 leading agents in the Italian Secret Service were sentenced to prison in 1979 for hiding and protecting key suspects.
The secret services had definitely obstructed the work of the judicial authorities by hiding evidence and burying reports. And when certain people wanted to speak, it was decided that the best thing to do was plug the source, gag them, and say, "We don't want to hear what you have to say."
Investigators in other countries also found their inquiries sabotaged. The Munich blast was caused by a sophisticated pipe bomb. Just weeks after the attack, the police concluded that a lone extremist, Gundolf Köhler, had been responsible. Köhler had died in the attack. But numerous witnesses claimed they had seen Köhler in the company of 2 other people just before the explosion. Despite these sightings and Köhler's membership of a far-right paramilitary group, the police found no further suspects and closed the investigation. Ignaz Platzer and his lawyer Werner Dietrich believe they could be dealing with a cover-up. They want the inquiry to be reopened.
Many of the witnesses who were interviewed by the Criminal Investigation Department said, "We were made to feel as if we were the criminals." We were interviewed so harshly that we had the impression that the investigators had their own theory and that our evidence, which challenged this, was not welcome and was therefore painted as irrelevant or unreliable.
There was something fishy about this story. The police just stopped investigating. I want justice. I want the real killers.
For many years, the various European terror attacks were viewed as unconnected events, the work of local terrorists. But now there's evidence of a more sinister explanation. A car bomb in Italy, not long after the Piazza Fontana incident, helps shed some light on the other terror attacks in Europe. In 1972, near Petiano, in the northeast of Italy, a blast killed 3 policemen. Eventually, investigators trained their sights on Vincenzo Vinciguerra and his right-wing terrorist group Ordine Nuovo. Public prosecutor Felice Casson spent 10 years investigating the attack.
First of all, the extreme left was accused. And then, because this line of inquiry didn't hold up, the state accused small local gangsters. At a certain point, it became clear that the Carabinieri, the secret services, the police, and even the magistrate's office in Gorizia had all played a major role in trying to derail the investigation.
Investigators discovered that members of the Carabinieri and the Gorizia magistrate's office had doctored and suppressed crucial evidence in a bid to implicate left-wing extremists.
It was the entire apparatus of state that covered up the movements of these neo-fascists who carried out this massacre.
Vincenzo Vinciguerra is now serving a life sentence for the Petiano attack. But testifying in court in the mid-1980s, he claimed that he and his right-wing group were protected and supported by a wider, shadowy organization that was connected at the highest levels to the military secret service. At the time, Vinciguerra's claims were dismissed, but Casson, who had brought him to trial, kept on digging. In 1990, Casson gained access to the archives of the Italian Military Intelligence Service and unearthed documents revealing a top-secret organization.
What came out was the existence of a secret clandestine structure headed by the chief of the Italian secret services and codenamed Gladio, Stay Behind.
Casson found documents that connected this mysterious force to NATO. The Italian Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, was forced to go public, causing a major European scandal. Andreotti admitted that the secret organization Gladio existed. He also revealed that it was part of a much wider network of secret stay-behind armies coordinated by NATO throughout Western Europe during the Cold War. Britain and the US had secretly trained and recruited civilians and military men in many European countries. All kinds of people were recruited to the paramilitary groups in a tradition established by the Allies in the years immediately after the Second World War. They took seriously the old adage that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even enlisting prominent Nazis to the anti-Soviet cause. In Germany, the Oktoberfest bomb also exploded at a crucial moment. The governing Social Democrat Chancellor, Helmut Schmidt, was perceived by some as being too weak to handle the left-wing terrorism of the Red Army faction and the growing anti-nuclear movement. According to press reports, elements in the Secret Service were determined to bring hardliner Franz Josef Strauss to power. Investigators suspect that elements within stay-behind and far-right organizations use the strategy of tension to break the left and encourage a population cowed by terrorism to keep reliable centrist governments in power.
Everything has its beginning, but it doesn't start at one. It starts long before that, in chaos. The world is born from zero. The moment zero becomes one is the moment the world springs to life. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. Taking it all back to one solves nothing. So long as zero remains, 1 will eventually grow to 100 again.